What is going on, guys, and welcome to Center Elements in CSS. And like the title pretty much self-explains, this is what we're going to be doing in this video. We're going to be looking at the ways how we can center elements in CSS. And we're going to start with the most basic one. We're going to say that we have a div, and the div has a paragraph. And over here, I'm just going to say that paragraph has a hello world. And let's say that I would want this text to be in the center, right? So you can see over here, I created already a style tags because I don't want to create an external style sheet because I think it's going to be a little bit better for us to work like this within the style tags. So here I'm just going to write a selector. I'm not going to say the selector is going to be div. And here I'm just going to say that we're going to have a background color just so we can see what we're doing. I'm going to say something like beige. And the next thing that I would want to do is actually text align. And text align property is center, right? So when we have an inline element like the text over here, right? We can use this text align of the parent element, and it's going to be setting them right exactly in the center. So this is how we can work if we have text, and also I could line it up, let's say right. You can see that it's moving right. And obviously I could set it left, but you can see by default it's actually in the left. Now it would also work with another inline elements, let's say like a anchor tags, right? The link. So over here I would create a link that's going nowhere, but I would say again hello world, right? And again you can see that it is a link, it is clickable. You can see over here. However, if I set it over here center, it would be also in the center, right? Because it would work the same way. And also we can do the same thing with an images. If I go over here and if I would say that this is going to be image, and I just copied an image of a Vladimir Putin with Donald Trump riding on a horse because I think it's funny. But over here I would say width right away because it's pretty big image and I don't want to use the whole page for that. So I'm going to say 50. And over here I'm just going to say that height is also going to be 50. So if I have height is 50 over here like this. So you can see that this is my image and it's right away in the center, right? And again, if I move it around and I say, let's say right, you can see that it's moving right. And again, it's because it is a inline element that we can actually manipulate with this text align property. So this would be the easiest thing to actually place it in the center. Now there's another way that we're going to look at in a few moments where we can actually create the image as a display block element, right? As a block element. And we're going to use a little bit different way how to center it. But just an easiest way is actually using this text align property over here, right, left, or center. Now moving along, let's have a look how we can actually work with actual div, which is a block element, and how we can actually place it in the center. So let's say we have a div that has like, let's say text over here, text here, but I would want this div to be center. Now the problem is that you can see that div is right away spanning all across our web page, right? Because it is a block element, right? So it doesn't matter whether I change the size of the screen or not. You can see that it's still sitting right here. So in order for me to actually work with this div and actually place it exactly in the center, first I would need to create a width for this div. So in this case, I'm just going to say that I would want this div to be like 20 pixels. So you can see over here, maybe let's make it a little bit bigger so our text fits in here. So you can see this is my div, right? 30 pixels. But you can see right now it's lining up to the left. It's not spanning all across. So what I would do over here, I would write a margin. And the first thing that I'm writing is basically a vertical margin. That would be 0. I don't want to affect that. However, here I would write a horizontal margin and I would just set it to auto. And you can see what happens, that it right away jumps in the center, right? So the only thing we needed to add this width over here, and then we can actually work with the block elements the same way. So we can place them with this margin property where we're saying margin 0 auto. Now we could have written also here just this margin auto, and you can see that it works the same way. However, it's a little bit better if we just specify that we would want the vertical. Well, we could change the vertical if we wanted to, but in this case, I don't want to affect the vertical, but I just want to set the horizontal to auto. So this would be how to do that. Now it would also work with an image, like I said. So if we go over here, and let's say that I'm just going to create again this image, and I'm going to say image and source, and over here I would say that source again would be Putin. Over here my image, and let's say make it a little bit bigger. I'm just going to say that width is going to be like 100 pixels, right? And the height also is going to be like 100 pixels. So over here we have an image. You can see that it's sitting over here, but it's sitting again on the left hand side. Now what we would need to do, again, we have a image, so I'm using a image selector, and over here I would need to write that again. I want my margins to be auto, right? So I just write margin auto over here, and you can see that nothing is happening. And why nothing is happening? Because it is still an inline element. So over here, if I write display and I say that I want display block, you can see right away how it moved, right? You can see how it moved right away to the right because I'm saying that I want margin auto. If I will again get rid of this margin auto, you can see how it move actually to the right, to the left, I'm sorry. So again, once we actually create this image as a block instead of inline, because we know that images by default are inline. Once we create them as a block, we can again use the same property that we're using with block elements, and we just say that we want a margin auto, and they're right away going to be in the middle. Now, there's also, we can do the same thing, obviously, with a links, because again, we can display them whether as inline elements or as a block element, so it also would work the same way. And just let me show you what would be the difference of, let's say that if we have two images side by side, right? What would be the difference how we're doing that? So let's say over here that I have a 50 height and 50 width, like that image, which is 150 over here. So I have this one image, right? And I'm just going to copy this 2 times. So you can see what's happening. If I have this display block and the margin is auto, so they are displayed as a block, and actually, you know, they're sitting in a center. However, they're right directly on the top of each other, right? So if you have 2 images, right, and you want them side by side, you cannot use this property. You can only use this property if you have, let's say, in this case, if you have 2 images, maybe 3 images, and you want them all side by side, you would need to use the text align property. So what I'm going to do over here, I'm just going to delete this. I don't want them to be displayed block. And what I would write over here, I would say that the body, I'm actually selecting the whole body, and I would say that I want text align center. That's it. So if you have, let's say, if you have a case where you have images side by side and you want them to be displayed side by side, you would need to use this text align property. However, if you don't care, if you want them to be in a new line, you would use the display block and margin auto property. So those would be pretty much the big differences between actually using the display block or actually text align center. Now also one thing that to remember is that you can see over here, if I delete this over here like this, and if I go back over here, and if I would say, let's say an image as a selector, and when I just say display block, you can see that I'm not writing a width for an image. And the reason why I'm not writing the width like I did with the other block, remember that first div, is the fact you can see already has the width. And that's always going to be the case with images, that they already will going to have a width. You won't going to have to do it the same as you're doing with a regular block. So over here again, if I just write margin and I say 0 and auto, you can see that it's going to the center. So you don't need to worry about the width property for the images, because it's already, you're most likely going to be setting it somewhere, or they come already with the preset width, right? You can see over here it's 273 by 185. You cannot have a image that doesn't have a width. It's impossible. Now let's move along and let's actually look at how we can work by placing the images vertically, right, in a center. So again, we're going to start with the most basic case, and the basic case is going to be that we have a div, and that div is again going to have like some kind of text, and this text is going to be again hello world, right, something like this. So we go back over here to the style, and again I'm just going to create a div, Over here, I'm going to say that this has a background color, and the background color, let's say, would be like something like this, right? And you can see that by default, right away, the text is actually sitting in the center, right? So one thing that we can do is, if we don't care about the size, let's say, of this div, what we can do is we can always add a padding evenly. So over here, if I go back to the paragraph over here, and if I would say that, let's say, paragraph would have a padding, I'm going to say that the padding is going to be, let's say, right away 20 pixels. And what I mean by 20 pixels, you can see in all the places, right? It's going to be left, right, top and bottom. Now we don't care about left and right, because like we know that we can actually text a line over here center like this, so we don't care about this padding. However, if we would just more specifically say that we just want top and bottom, you can see that as I'm changing my padding, my text stays in the center. So again, if we don't care about the width, let's say, of this div, we can always use this padding, and it's always our text is actually going to be in the center. Now you can see that I'm just going to create a little bit bigger screen so we can see it better, but you can see what's happening, right? Doesn't matter what we're doing, we can change whatever padding we want, and it's still always going to be in the center. Now the problem starts if we have a limited height of the div, right? So let's say in this case, I'm going to say that the height of the div is, let's 60 pixels, right? And this is the problem. You can see the padding is not helping us, right? Because we have a set height for the div, and it doesn't matter what we do with the padding, it's still going to be here like this. Now we can go manually and start setting the padding. Let's say we can say that padding bottom, something like this, and then we can basically start like, I don't know, like 20. So then it's going to be moving a little bit to the bottom, but we don't want to mess around with that. The easiest way what we can do is actually, as we're working over here, we can just set the line height, right? So you see that I have a height for the div, and I can just say that line height and set exactly to the 60 pixels, basically set exactly the same size that I'm using here. And again, you can see that my text again is right away in the center vertically. And again, we can just add this text align just so it's sitting in the center. And if I even move it over here, if I say 80, again, if I say 80 over here, you can see that I'm not going to have any kind of problems over here as I'm working with this height and line height. And let's have a look what happens if we have, let's say, two lines. So let's say again that right now I have a line break. We're just going to pretty specifically going to say that, let's say that we have two lines over here, right? That if we have a bunch of text, not just one line over here, that would always, we could work with the line height. Now you can see right away that my line height doesn't work. And why it doesn't work, you can see that I have an 80 pixel width over here for this div, and I have a line height for 80 pixels. So right away you can see that this text is sitting somewhere outside here. So we would need to do some changes. Now before we do the changes, what I'm going to do over here, I'm just going to get rid of this line height first of all. Now you can see that my text is sitting all the way on the top. Now before we start actually working on a paragraph, because this is what we're going to do, I want to show you that before you spend 3-4 hours doing something, only thing you need to do is over here, you're pretty much selecting all the elements, and what you need to write over here is margin 0 and padding 0, because you don't want any pre-default like paddings that already elements have actually to be messing with it and keep looking for answers that are not there. Because once you do this, then right now you're pretty much in control of your own destiny. Before that, you can spend hours and hours doing something, and at the end you're not going to go anywhere because there's some preset margins and padding. So if you select this is pretty much a selector for all the elements, and you just set them margin 0 and padding 0. Now back to our text, which we want to place in the center, right? So the first thing that we want to do is actually say that we want a paragraph, and we would want that paragraph to be absolute. So I'm going to say the position over here, and this is going to be absolute. So now you can see right away how I actually added it absolute. So the next thing that I would want to say is what would be the location, and I would say that I want top location 50%. So you can see it moves all the way to the in the middle of the page, and I will explain to you why it's doing that like that. And over here, I'm just going to say that I would want a left also 50%. So again, but the problem, you can see that it's actually doing that within the page. And why it's doing that? Because when we're selecting something to be absolute, and actually it doesn't care about any of the other elements in the page, right? It doesn't care about it. It's pretty much only cares about the whole page. So if I'm setting to absolute and I'm saying 50%, it's actually counting from here 50% and here 50%. But we don't want that. So how do we fix that? Well, if we have set over here this child element to be absolute, and if we use over here to be this parent element, and we say that we want a position, we want the position to be relative, you can say right away what happens. It actually moves where we want it to move, because you can see that this div right now is working as pretty much a guardian. Well, dumb saying, but anyway, something like this. So pretty much it holds this paragraph accountable. It cannot jump anymore left and right and whatever. It needs to stay over here within this div. And if I'm going to be changing anything over here, you can see that it's all the time going to be staying in a set. Even if I put like 100%, right? You can see that it's pretty much, it just pushed it out. However, it's still over here by this div, right? I mean, 100% maybe wasn't the best case scenario. This is what we would use for unordered lists. But again, if we're staying within here, we always going to be within this div over here. So again, I'm just going to say 50%. But you can see the problem here is it's not exactly in the center. It's not exactly in the center because it has its own dimensions. So if I over here, I would write a transform, and I would say translate property. And what I would need to do is actually get rid of its own dimensions. So you can see that I moved it to the left when I said negative 50%. And here I'm just going to move it to the top, negative 50%. And you can see that basically what I did, I said, listen, I want to get rid of 50% of your own dimensions. So then you move to the left. And then I want to remove your dimensions to the top, 50%. So we move the actual text to the top. So this is the best way how we can move in this case, this block element. Well, this time it has a text, right? So this is how we can work with the block elements, how we can set them pretty much in a center. Now it would also work the same way for two cases, right? So let's say that we have a case right now where you have let's say you're going to create this background image, right? You're going to say a background, you're going to say background image over here like this. So you have a background image, and I'm going to say URL, right? And I'm going to use the same image. And what I'm going to do over here, I'm just going to say that image is going to have a size over here, and it's going to have a background size is going to be cover over here. But I would just need to save it over here, and you can see that right now I have my image over here. And I probably would need to change the text over here, the color, white. Something like this, maybe we can see it better. See, this is our text, and over here I can use this background repeat over here, no repeat, something like this. And again, we would just need to save it and refresh it. It's just a brackets is messing up a little bit right now. So what you're seeing right now, that we can use the same thing if we want to place some type of text over here anywhere, right? Again, and if we're just doing all the same things, however, if we're just working with these top and left margins right now, basically what we're doing is we're just moving this text to the background image wherever we would want. So again, if I would say 10%, it would be sitting 10%, and you get an idea what's happening. That basically this is the best way how we can work with the block elements and how we can actually place them in the center. Now it would work the same way, let's say over here, if I would create another div, and let's say that I would have a div, and that div, let's say in this case, I'm just going to create a different class. And you know what, I'm just going to create an ID. I'm just going to say ID, and the ID is going to be, I don't know, like first, right? Something like that. And over here, if I would go back, and if I would just change this, that I would want this to be a, let's say for the div, for the first, so I'm gonna say first. And over here, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna say that I want my div to have a width. Over here, I don't know, like 40 pixels, not maybe 40 pixels. Let's start with, I don't know, with like 20 pixels. And the height of 40 pixels, 20 pixels, sorry. And the background color of doesn't really matter, right? Let's go with Bisque over here. And again, we would just need to save it and refresh it over here. But you can see over here that the problem is that I'm selecting all the divs to have a background color. So over here, what I would need to say, you see this background image that I'm actually selecting over here for this Putin, whatever, background image. So what I would need to do over here, I would need to create another ID. And I'm going to say that this is going to be second. And over here, what I would need to say that only for the second, I would want a background image like that. So you can see over here now I have my div over here like this, and this is going to be my big div with that background picture, right? So, and this is where we're going to be again moving. So if I want 50%, you can see again, if I do the translate, and if I even change the sizes, and I can say like 30%, I can actually say 30% over here like this. I can say like 30%. So now you can see that the width is actually 30%. And over here, I would say the height is also, let's say 30%. So you're understanding that right now, basically what I can do is I can manipulate these divs, and that's how I'd actually place them in a center. This is going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.